We begin with the recitation from the Holy Quran. Ahmad, would you please play?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Imran Sardar. I am a research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies. On behalf of the Institute of Regional Studies, President Aarish, Ambassador Nadeem Rayaz, and my colleagues, I welcome everyone to this webinar on farmers' protest in India. Has the government weathered the storm? As you may be little aware, the farmer protest is an ongoing protest in India. Modi government last year introduced 3 laws in which basically market committee structure has been dismantled. This led to the widespread protest in the country. To discuss the merits and demerits of these laws, we have Aarishullah Khan with us. Aarish has 19 years experience in the field of research, development, and communication. Since 2011, he is working as a research analyst at the Institute of Regional Studies. He is also the editor of the Institute's research journal named Regional Studies. Previously, Aarish has worked as a political specialist at the embassy, US Embassy in Islamabad for around 5 years. He has also worked at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, wherein he authored SIPRI's policy paper titled The Terrorist Threat and Policy Response in Pakistan. He has co-authored several research studies on pressing issues of national concern, such as a report titled Addressing Overcrowding in Prison by Reducing Pre-Conviction Detention in Pakistan, that is published in 2018. Another report titled Countering Violent Extremism on Campuses, published in 2019. And an upcoming report titled Post-Merger Provision of Security and Justice Services in Manakan Division and Tolgar, Lessons for KPMD. He has also authored several research papers on issues related to Pakistan and China and Pakistan and India relations. He occasionally writes for newspapers on the aforementioned subjects. Mr. Aarish, since the 3 laws that Modi government has recently introduced, wherein the role of middleman has been cut down, and the farmers can sell his products directly to the buyers on any price that rather than the government fix for them. Don't you think that these laws can turn out to be very successful and very useful for the farmers? So why farmers are still insisting to repeal them? What's your take on this issue? Over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Imran. I think the first question that you raised about whether these laws are good or bad, I think that is the very first question that all of us need to understand. And that is where I'll begin my talk from, to put things into perspective, to discuss what these laws are all about. I have a PowerPoint presentation as well, so I would share my screen first.
Yes, please.
I think all of you can see my screen now.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So all of you can see the presentation, right?
Yes, it's fine.
So I have to put this Zoom thing a bit in the corner so that I can see. As Imran mentioned, that that is a very pertinent question. That if these laws are supposed to be good laws for market reform, we need to ask ourselves a few questions that why the three new agricultural laws have been introduced. As Imran said, like if these are good laws, why are the farmers protesting against them? Where do things stand between the government of India and the farmers as it is all headed now today? So first to put things into the perspective of how the Indian economy, agriculture is placed in the Indian economy, I'll share with you some figures. Um, Agriculture as percentage of labor force, like the percent of labor that is employed in the agriculture sector, as you can see in the red part of this pie chart, it is about 47%. Like the agriculture employs about 47% of the labor force of India. But compare that to the percentage of agriculture in the GDP of India, and you would see a marked difference between the percentage of agriculture in the labor force employment and the percentage of agriculture in the GDP. And that is what the government think where the problem lies. But if you compare that with the situation in other South Asian countries, for instance, in Bangladesh as well, you see that agriculture sector employs around, you can see 43% of the labor force, but its contribution to the national GDP is less than 15%, I think around 14%. Same is the case with Pakistan, like the agriculture sector employs over around 42% of the labor force, but its contribution to the national GDP is around 24%. It is slightly higher than Bangladesh and India, but still it's not up to the desirable level. Ironically, we have yesterday we heard the news about Pakistan wanting to import sugar and cotton yarn from India despite all this. So perhaps that is a discussion for some other talk that we can do later. And then the situation in Sri Lanka is not very different there as well. Uh, High labor force employment in the agriculture sector and low productivity. But if you compare that with countries in other regions, for instance, look at Brazil. So around 9% of the labor force is employed in the field of agriculture, but the productivity is around 6% of the GDP. When you go to the developed countries, for instance, France, the difference between the two towers shrinks further. New Zealand, it's shrunk even further. And in the US, actually, the productivity, that is agriculture as part of the GDP, is actually higher than agriculture as employer of the labor force. So the current government in India believes that the legal and policy framework that is primarily geared towards food security is responsible for this situation in the Indian economy. And some of the legal instruments that are geared toward having food security, one of them is the Essential Commodities Act of 1955. It puts limits on stocking, movement, and trading of essential commodities, obliges the government to make compulsory procurements of such essential commodities when their prices rise. So the BJP government, and this is an excerpt from the Economic Survey 2019-2020, which preceded the 2020-2021 budget and the three laws that the farmers are protesting against. So this says, while penalizing speculative hoarding, the ECA also ends up penalizing the much desirable consumption smoothing that storage provides. The anti-hoarding provisions of ECA discourage open reporting of stock holdings, storage capacities, trading, and carry forward positions. So that is the government's perspective on this law, that it thinks has become outdated as of the 21st century. So let me further explain the government's perspective on what it terms as outdated laws of India on agriculture. So the government argues that measures aimed at food security like the ECA create market distortions and disincentivizes investment in the agriculture sector. So if I'm an investor and if I want to invest in, for instance, storage of agricultural produce. And if I know that there are certain limits on it beyond which I cannot go, or at times limits could be placed on my capacity to trade between different states of India, as agriculture is a state subject as well. So I might be discouraged from investing in the sector. Then the government argues that these measures are also ineffective in controlling prices of essential commodities. And if you go through the Economic Survey 2019-2020, the government has given adequate data and graphs and charts about how even when these controls are introduced, they are unable to bring down the prices of essential commodities, the purpose for which these controls have been instituted. Then, thirdly, the government argues that they unnecessarily and ineffectively utilize government's costly enforcement mechanisms. So, if you have a law for enforcing anything, you have to have an implementation mechanism for that law as well. And that implementation mechanism in this case would come in the form of law enforcement. So if there is any violation, there would have to be raids on the places where allegedly some food grains would be stocked, and then people will have to be arrested. And since the government argues that the conviction rates in these cases are quite low, so that is why this is an unnecessary and ineffective utilization of government's resources. So when the government emerges as the largest buyer, it crowds out healthy competition in the market. That is another point raised by the government. Additionally, grain procurements are driving agricultural investment away from more productive food crops. Like the government thinks that if a farmer, for instance, wants to invest in a cash crop that can be exported, but he is discouraged from doing that because he thinks that if there is a guaranteed price for me if I grow food grains, then he would continue growing food grains, and he would not go toward growing, for instance, cash crops or vegetables and fruits that India can export. So, and another problem that the government has identified with the existing legal mechanism, or the existing legal mechanism before the introduction of the three laws, was that the minimum support prices that the government had introduced for the procurement of agricultural produce from the farmers, they have been consistently increasing, and the government maintains that it has not in a way remained minimum over the years. And they have very interestingly used the word secular increase in the minimum support price. So the government's answer to all these arguments about the ineffectiveness of the previous legal regime on agriculture sector was the introduction of these three farm laws that it introduced in September 2020. So what are these three farm laws all about, which the farmers are protesting against? So the first law is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act of 2020, which allows intra and interstate trade of agricultural commodities beyond the agricultural produce market committees, that is the government designated markets. So it essentially allows the farmers or anyone who would want to sell agricultural commodities outside of the government designated places. And it also allows intra and interstate trade done outside of the government designated markets, which are called the APMC mandis. The second law that the farmers are protesting against is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act 2020. That it determines the parameters for farmers to enter into contracts with agribusiness firms or large retailers on pre-agreed prices of their produce. So it's kind of a facilitation mechanism for big business to enter into agreements with farmers. And then the third law is the Essential Commodities Act of 1955 that I just elaborated a short while ago of 1955 has been amended through this act And the amendment actually removes certain food items like cereals, pulses, potatoes, onions, edible oil seeds, and oils from the list of essential commodities that at times the government can place restrictions on, and the government is obliged to necessarily buy from the farmers. So all this sounds making quite an economic logic. So why would the farmers be protesting against this? The question that Imran raised in the beginning of this webinar, it is like, the farmers think that the facilitation of trade outside the APMCs would slowly and gradually render the APMCs redundant and dysfunctional. So we need to keep in mind that the government has not abolished the APMCs altogether. Like, the government hasn't said that there would not be any trading in the government designated mandis. The government has only allowed trade outside of the mandis, but the farmers fear that the way it happens with any such structure, that if the farmers would be getting better prices outside of the APMCs, at least initially, from the corporate buyers, all the farmers would not sell their produce in the APMCs or minimum support price. They would go outside the APMCs and will sell their produce to the big businesses who would be willing to buy that produce outside of the APMCs. So they think that if that would continue to happen for some time, the APMCs would lose revenue because the APMCs are run by the state governments, and the state governments collect taxes based on trading in the APMCs. So if no trading would be taking place in the APMCs, slowly and gradually APMCs would become redundant and dysfunctional. And when the farmers would be left at the mercy of the big businesses, and if the big businesses at some point in future would decide that they would not buy the farm produce at the prices that they were buying at earlier, and they would reduce the prices, then the farmers wouldn't have anywhere to go to. Their second point is that without any licensing provisions for trading outside the APMCs, there will be greater risk of fraud. So for trading in the APMCs, all the parties who are trading in the APMCs have to be licensed. So the farmers or the representatives of the farmers who are protesting encamped outside Delhi right now, they argue that there would be a greater risk of fraud if it would allow um, farmers who are not licensed. Third, and I think the most altruistic point of the farmers is that if since India is not a food surplus country, it will regret doing away with agricultural support mechanisms to farmers for food security. Their point basically is that if farmers would start producing the crops that are selling easily abroad or at home, then they might not necessarily be planting the crops that are needed by the country for food security. So that is essentially the debate between free market and protectionism. And that is where the farmers actually are siding on the side of protectionism and warning the government that such measures of introduction of free market forces in the agriculture sector could compromise food security. And that is what the previous legal regime had all along been aimed at. So, but the government also has some points in response to it. The government thinks that it is modernizing agriculture by doing away with unhealthy market distortions. So it would essentially increase agricultural output. So when the output would be increased, it would automatically perhaps lead to food security. The farmers obviously disagree with this contention, but that is a point that is raised by the government. Secondly, it thinks that these blind subsidies given to the farmers would be removed gradually, or would be gradually reduced, and it would ease the unnecessary burden on national economy. This third point of the government is quite important to understand. The government argues that the minimum support price has only benefited the already well-to-do farmers of states like Punjab and Haryana. The, the point of the government is that it's only in states like Punjab and Haryana where the government is buying around 80 to 90% of the farmers' produce through the APMCs. It is not the case all over India. Why is it the case in Punjab and Haryana? Because their APMCs are better organized and they're able to conduct trade more smoothly than some of the other states. For instance, I'll come to that a bit later, but some of the other states are not doing as well. So as you can see that only 19%, there was a survey, national survey conducted recently, according to which only 19% of the households are actually aware of the MSP. Only 7% of the farming households sell their crops to the procurement agency through the APMCs. And only 10% of the crops are sold at the MSP. Now, the government argues that since it is very effectively used in certain states like Punjab and Haryana, it has a negative correlational impact on the poor farmers of other states, for instance, Bihar, where the government is only able to procure around 2% of the total produce of the farmers. And what happens is that eventually the farmers end up selling their produce at 20 to 25% lower cost, lower price than the market, because they cannot store it and there are all sorts of restrictions on it. So they are then forced to sell it on prices lower than the market. Well, despite all this rational debate about the pros and cons of the laws, whether they're good laws, whether they're bad laws, the bottom line is that the farmers are on the borders of Delhi for more than 120 days, I guess, perhaps more. And they're protesting against these laws, and they think that these laws are against their interests. So the next slide is the last slide of my presentation, but I will dwell on that slide for some time because I will mark the trajectory of the farmers' protest in this slide. So I have listed, as you can see in the bottom of the screen, I have listed certain landmarks in the farmers' protest. And I will chart the trajectory of the farmers' protest based on all these landmarks, and I will score the score of the farmers' protest on each of these landmarks, whether this landmark led to a higher score for the farmers or a lower score. So if you would see the worm rising, it would mean that the score of the farmers is rising and it is more effective. If you would see the worm sliding down, it would mean that the farmers' scores are losing. They're losing their effectiveness in the protests. So it started with the protest reaching the capital at that stage. I think if it was standing at 7, when the government actually agreed to negotiate with the farmers, it raised the profile of the protest because it was a bit unlike the BJP government, which is not quite receptive to responding to street protests, as we had seen in the street protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was a situation somewhat similar to this one, in which the government had passed a law and the people were protesting against that law. And they were asking the government, actually those protests actually started way before the laws were actually enacted, but the government went on and enacted those laws. And even when the protests were continuing after the enactment of those laws, the government was refusing to negotiate with the protesters. But it was very different in this case. The farmers reached the borders of Delhi around end of November, even though initially the state home minister Amit Shah said that the government would only negotiate with the farmers when they would vacate the on the borders of Delhi. But soon that condition was given up, and the agriculture minister, Union Agriculture Minister, started negotiating with the farmers, and they also, in the very first meeting, they also said that they were open to amending the laws, which I think was also a huge success for the farmers. That not only did they make the government to negotiate with them, but to agree to amending the clauses of all three laws in the very first meeting. And that is what continued all the way until the 11th meeting of the government with the farmers, before I will come down to it when the Republic Day, what happened on the Republic Day. So the 11th meeting happened somewhere before the Republic Day. I think it was on the 22nd of January. So until that time, the government was negotiating with the farmers and was telling the farmers that uh, it is ready to amend these laws. So the point that the question that arises in one's mind at this stage is that why would the government be so eager to negotiate, or a government like BJP, which didn't have a history of negotiating with protesters like this, why was it so eager to protest, to negotiate with the protesters in this case? So I think there were four major factors responsible for this. One, the protests were led by farmers from Punjab and Haryana, primarily the Sikh community, which is a strong community in the sense that it is highly represented in the armed forces, and also it is highly geographically concentrated in Punjab, and somewhat to some extent in Haryana as well, but highly geographically concentrated in Punjab. More than 50, I think, around 58% of the population of Punjab is Sikh, and around 5% that of Haryana is also Sikh. So, and another point which is kind of related to this one is that since it was the farmers from Punjab and Haryana that were mostly protesting against these laws, in Punjab, there's a Congress government in Punjab. In Haryana, there is BJP has a coalition government with a local coalition partner, that is the Janayak Janata Party, the JJP, and which was feeling the heat from the farmers' protest. And the BJP was uncertain whether its government in Haryana could survive such a massive protest, which is emanating partly from that state. But all those speculations about whether the government in Haryana would succeed or whether it would fall, all those speculations were laid to rest a couple of weeks ago, when the BJP's government in Haryana, or the chief minister from BJP, won a vote of confidence from the state legislative assembly. And then the other concern of the government was that the opposition political parties were capitalizing on these farmers' protests quite big. Hardly a day would go by without any Congress leader or the Congress's Twitter handle tweeting about it. Other regional political parties were also criticizing the government a lot because of these laws and because of these protests, like the Shiv Sena, the NCP, like the Trinamool Congress. All these regional parties were also protesting, were supporting these protests of the farmers. So that did put the BJP government a bit on the back foot. Then I think another very important point in this regard for the government was that the farmers' protest was getting a lot of attention internationally. And that's what we saw when international celebrities started tweeting about these farmers. Celebrities like Greta Thunberg, Rihanna, most importantly, I think Rihanna, because Rihanna has like 108 million followers. 108 million followers on Twitter is huge. It's more than Donald Trump in his heyday. I think he had 70 to 80 million followers. So celebrities like these tweeting about the farmers' protest really made the government so anxious that the Indian Ministry of External Affairs actually responded to tweets by individuals, which was also a bit unusual for any government. But the Indian government went ahead and did that, and perhaps primarily because they command such high following and could turn international opinion against the government. Besides that, I think while those tweets were on media radar for a long time, long before that, in December, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had also issued a statement in favor of the farmers' protest, and that is also primarily because of the power of the Sikh diaspora abroad. So there are very powerful Sikh diasporas in Canada, especially in Canada, because they're highly represented in the Canadian Parliament as well, but also in the US and the UK. So these are all the four factors that made the government negotiate with the farmers quite eagerly. Then in the first week or first or second week of February, the Supreme Court took up the cases of the various cases that were, some were against the law, some were against the protests. So the Supreme Court clubbed all those protests and started hearing the cases. And the Supreme Court then appointed a four-member committee, which included one farmer leader and three other representatives, to look into the matter and stayed the implementation of these laws until the court made a decision about them. So on the face of it, it wasn't that bad a decision, but the farmers somehow rejected it and rejected the constitution of the committee by the Supreme Court. Here, I think the worm should go down because it was not something that the government was doing. It was something that the Supreme Court was doing. And even then, the farmers refused to acknowledge that. And the farmers said that the Supreme Court appointed committee was partial because three of already had known views in support of the farm laws. So they said that the committee could not have an impartial proceedings and an impartial report. The Supreme Court was not particularly amused by it. Obviously, the Chief Justice of India then also gave a statement about it, that if the farmers are saying bad things about the committee, they are actually casting aspersions on the court because the court has appointed that committee. And if the farmers think that it is an impartial committee, it's not a neutral committee, and they perhaps are saying that the Supreme Court is not impartial as well. So that's why the Supreme Court didn't like it. Then when there was the Republic Day of India on January 26th, the way we have Pakistan Day on March 23rd, when we have a parade in Islamabad, India has a Republic Day on January 26th, on which they also have a national parade in the capital. So on that very day, the farmers decided to have a tractor parade in the capital, which the government obviously was not allowing it. And there were clashes between the farmers and the protesting farmers and the police, which left around. One of the important things that happened on that day was that one of the protesting farmers got up on the Red Fort and hoisted the Nishan Sahib flag on it and removing the Indian flag from there. So what it did was that it hurt the pride of Indians overall in general. Two, it gave a very religious color to this protest, and it also vindicated the government's stance that this protest is primarily driven by farmers from Punjab and Haryana. So all that happened on that day, I think, went against the farmers, even though the farmers claimed later on that the two people that led those protests, one was Lakha Sidhana, the other was Deep Singh Sidhu. The farmers claimed that both of them were actually BJP's moles in the farmers' movement, and they disowned both of them. And they said that the farmers did not condone violence on that day and did not condone any acts that were committed on that day. And they said, and the two personalities have a certain history of association with BJP and its allies. I can go to into the details of it if somebody is interested. But both the figures have some association, past association with BJP or its allied political parties. So the farmers disowned them, and they said that farmers have nothing to do with those acts. Then came the point where the celebrities tweeted about the farmers' protest. It was actually after the January 26th Republic Day happenings. So I think that's where the worm should rise high, because that gave international attention to the movement, and made the government quite uneasy about uh, all the international attention it was getting. So I think that's where the farmers protested a couple of scores. But then, when the campaigning for elections started in four key states of India and one union territory, and all four very important states for all the political parties involved. So that diverted all the media attention to the campaigning in those states of Assam, West Bengal, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. So all the media attention got diverted to those states. And I think that is where I think the graph should come down again. And that's why my worm here drops for the farmers' protest. And I think it became less relevant for the media. And I think that should be a source of concern for the farmers leading that protest movement. I think another low for the farmers' protest came on March 26th, when they had announced another Bharat Bandh, through which they wanted to, to create a long jam in the whole of India, disrupting road and train service, disrupting business. This was not as successful as the one, for instance. Traders did not lend support to this March call, and the disruptions of traffic, or the disruption of day-to-day activities, or the disruption of businesses was not as bad as one might have expected, or one would have experienced in December. So if I would plot a trend line of this farmers' protest, the trend line is having a downward trend. I think the farmers' protest's trajectory overall, whether we like it or not, is in a downward trajectory. And that is all for all the reasons that I just explained, and all the milestones that it has on a downward trend. Now, I think BJP was quite shocked initially with the farmers' protest, and the way it was able to galvanize support, the way it was able to put uh, people on the street, thousands of people on the street, the way it was able to generate political opposition from other political parties, the way it was able to generate international support in the form of foreign decision makers or foreign celebrities chiming in favor of the farmers' protest. So the and despite all that, when the farmers were constantly refusing to negotiate on anything less than the revocation of the three laws, so the BJP was put quite on the back foot, despite the fact that it had bent backward so much, which was not quite characteristic of it. And the farmers were still refusing to negotiate with the BJP on anything short of repeal of all three laws. But I think over the period of time, the BJP has steadied after that initial shock. And I think it has come out stronger than previously, because it showed intent to negotiate, but the farmers refused. The Supreme Court stepped in. The farmers rejected the Supreme Court committee. The farmers wouldn't take anything short of repeal of the three laws, which showed their rigidity and compared to the flexibility showed by the government. Having said that, when the elections in the key states campaigning arrived, which is the election is, by the way, ongoing. So when the election campaigning days arrived and all the media attention was diverted to election, and I think the BJP now also claims that if it fares better in those elections than it did previously in those state elections, it would vindicate its stance on the three laws. It would make it kind of a vote on these three laws. And it would argue that despite having passed these three laws, and there are a lot of farmers in these three states, in these four states as well, including perhaps Pondicherry, I'm not that aware, but the BJP would claim that the people of India are still standing behind the party, no matter whether the farmers are protesting against the three laws, which vindicates its stance that the three laws are justified and should be there. On the flip side, if the BJP doesn't do as good, although the BJP is trying very hard, if it doesn't do as good, that might give the farmers a reason to say that, this is, you see, our protests were justified because, you see, it has lost the BJP, its vote bank, BJP's graph is going down, and our protests are responsible for it. The BJP's wrong decision of passing those three laws are responsible for it. But in the end, I would leave you with this tweet from Congress, which says, भाजपा के लाठी तंत्र से देश के लोकतंत्र को बचाना होगा. So we'll have to save the country's democracy from BJP's paternocracy or canocracy, like, when they're using the sticks or the whips. Congress had tweeted this, but this response to this tweet was also quite interesting. Someone, this girl who says, "Kaise vidhayak bechkar?" Like, how would you do that? How would you achieve that? By selling your MLAs. So that is what has been happening with most of the political parties. That BJP has been successful in making their MLAs change loyalties, and it has been able to Congress into states. So that is how it's politically playing out. But I think overall, the trajectory of the farmers' movement is on a downward trend. And I thank you with that.
Thank you very much, Aarish, for a very comprehensive presentation, especially your last slide that completely portrayed a picture of protest trajectory. And this negotiations are also going on, and Supreme Court also intervene, and there is also a celebrities also created hype in this, and the issue is still going on. I just want your attention towards the rationale behind. Is that the Indian government is going to denationalize or decentralize the market committee structure, or it is going to centralize the system, in which the Modi once called it a one market. We are heading towards the one market. So what's your take on it? Is it decentralization or a centralization of the system?
It is actually a centralization of the decision making, because if you see these laws are actually trumping certain state laws. So there's a like Pakistan, there's a concurrent list in India on which both the states and the federation can legislate, and these laws have an overriding effect on any state laws. So in that capacity, I think it is a move toward more centralization of decision making, but it's also a move toward more decentralization of the market practices, more deregulation of the market. And that is why the BJP government is usually blamed for being more supportive of the corporate interests. And even Rahul Gandhi had tweeted about it, "Hum do, hamare do," like, these are Amit Shah and Modi and Ambani and Adani, and they are actually running the show in India.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions more, but we move towards the question answer session. Now the floor is open. Anyone? There is a option, raise hand option.
Yeah, if you in the bottom of the screen there is the reactions tab. If you click on the reactions tab, another dialog box would appear in which you can raise hand and then ask a
Yes.
question, or you can just shoot it in if you want.
Thank you. The floor is open now.
I think Muhammad. Oh, there are a lot of questions. President Saab also has a question.
Sir, over to you, sir. Sir, unmute you. Unmute. You're not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Compliments to you, Aarish, for a very nice presentation. I will just take you to one of the last few sentences when what you said, that the farmers' movement is losing the momentum. Do you really think it's just going to simply die down? Or it's after a little lull, it's going to pick up? Because I don't think as far as I understand, there is really no desire of the Indian government to amend the three basic laws on which this entire movement is based. Your comments, please.
So as I said, a lot would depend on the outcome of these key elections in the key states. And I think the results would be out by May or somewhere mid or end of May. The farmers have also announced that they would hold a march in Delhi in the first half of May. So I think, although they say that they would continue protesting, but their maximalist stance and the rigidity on their maximalist stance, sir, I think has cost them. I think initially when the BJP was shocked by what was happening, I think they could have negotiated. I think they could have, because if you look at it, there is only one law among these three laws that is the most controversial. They could have at least agreed to amendments in that one law and left the other two laws alone. Some common ground could have been achieved in that, which they didn't, and I think that is costing them to lose momentum and support.
Thank you very much. So I think there's a need to study more. As what I can infer, there are multiple factors behind this protest that created the hype. So my question is little bit related to the gravity of this protest. So is it concentrated only in Punjab, or it's a united effort or protest by the farmers in India? What is the situation?
Well, the situation in Delhi, like the borders of Delhi, where the main protest site is, that is mostly Punjab and Haryana and a bit of Western UP. But at times, like when these farmers, they give calls for nationwide protests, like Bharat Bandh, then farmers from other states also chime in, and they also hold little protest rallies elsewhere as well. But it has not been as vibrant in other states as it has been in Punjab and Haryana. We've also seen the protesters attacking politicians in these two states and disrupting political rallies and all that, and that has not been happening elsewhere.
Okay, okay. So, at the moment, these laws are suspended by Supreme Court. How long?
Until there is a decision on it. Like, the committee that the Supreme Court, by the way, had appointed, I've read in the news that they have submitted the report to the Supreme Court, but I haven't seen anything about what's in the report in the media.
Okay, so don't you think that the farmers actually rejecting these laws because of just ignorance? Because maybe the BJP has failed to just project its the details or anything like this. So I think it's just because of ignorance or anything else behind it.
No,
But
I think no. I don't think it's because of ignorance. I think the farmers think that they have stronger cards. They think that they can make the BJP government agree to their demands because they are strong. But I think the way this protest has kept lingering on, and the way the BJP has actually discredited any aggression in the farmers movement by by projecting what happened on the January 26th very negatively, and the farmers also distancing themselves from such sort of aggressive actions. Now there is only as much as the farmers can do. They can keep just sitting around, and the BJP is good at ignoring anybody who cannot harm them. So they would continue to ignore them.
okay, thank you very much. I think Humaira Iqbal, research analyst from the Institute of Regional Study, wants to ask a question. Over to you, Humaira. Humaira Iqbal.
Ji, hello.
Yes, yes.
Am I audible? Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, Walaikum Assalam, you're audible.
Acha, Aarish, I wanted to ask what, in your opinion, is the reason behind this global support that we see for the farmer movement in India? Like, not just the opposition parties, but in the Western media, the celebrities, and so many other senior government officials in the Western government area. So how do you see that this global support basically came, and what is the reason behind this?
So, Humera, when we talk about the support that it has been, or the attention that it has been receiving from the international media, it is primarily because of the actual magnitude of the protest. It's like thousands of people encamping for over 100 days, and also like I think around 148 people have died on the protest site as of until now so far. So I think that is what generates international media's attention toward this cause. As far as the certain decision makers in the West and celebrities are concerned, I think that is primarily because of the power of the Sikh diaspora abroad, the Punjabi diaspora abroad. As I said, like Justin Trudeau gave a statement in favor of the farmers movement while he was actually addressing the Punjabi community of Canada via Zoom, and he had to say something to appease their sentiments. So there he said what he said, and also because the number of actually the parliamentarians in the Canadian Parliament, the proportion, the percentage of the parliamentarians, Sikh parliamentarians in the Canadian Parliament is actually higher than the proportion of Sikh parliamentarians in India. So that is what describes Justin Trudeau's support for the farmers movement. As far as the celebrities are concerned, I think it's once again the power of the Punjabi diaspora abroad. I think somebody might have had a Punjabi friend. Some of those celebrities actually then later on tweeted about having Punjabi friends. Some of them said like, some Punjabi friend of theirs had sent them something over, some food, Punjabi food or something. So they made their Punjabi connections quite evident later on. So I think one, it's the magnitude of the protest, and two, it is the Sikh diaspora abroad.
But sorry to add one more thing. Do you think that this Western support has complicated the matters for the Modi government? And don't you think that there was a massive protest regarding the registration laws and so many other laws and even the Kashmir humanitarian issues as well? So there is no Western support on those things. But why only for the Sikh community?
As I said, like it's interests, it's the diasporas in those countries that drive such support, and I think our diasporas, Pakistani diasporas, perhaps also need to be more active abroad and you know make something happen like this over Kashmir or anything else that interests us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Another participant, Tabina Siddiqui, wants to ask a question. Over to you, Tabina Siddiqui.
Hanji, Assalamualaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aarish, for such a wonderful presentation. My question is regarding your own opinion about this protest. You weighed two different opinions, like what the farmer position is and what the government position is. You have presented both arguments very well, but what is your own analysis or your own take of the situation? What do you think out of this situation, that who is on the right side of the issue? Because generally we do see that governments usually favor the big businesses in the market without consulting the impacted or concerned segments of the society or the economy. So this is this impression comes out of this situation. What is your analysis over this question of the position?
You've put me in a spot right there, Tabina. To give my own opinion on this. I personally, I am at a very personal level, I am against excessive government regulation of anything. I think government regulation distorts markets. But in the field of agriculture, when food security is at stake, perhaps there is a need for some sort of government regulation. But I think that government regulation also needs to be smart, and that also needs to be effective. And in this case, when we see that the minimum support price, if it was, as the government argues, as the Indian government argues, and it has given data about it, that if it has been secularly increasing over the past few years, as it has put it, like it has been consistently increasing over the past few years without any regard to market forces, and it has also been unevenly reaching different segments of the needy communities, that is the farmers, for food security. So if it has been benefiting farmers in Punjab and Haryana, and it has actually been negatively affecting the farmers in Bihar, I think there is a need for rethink in these policies, whether through these three laws or some other means. But I, for one, am against excessive government regulation of any sector. And I think even in the farming sector, there shouldn't be excessive government regulation.
Or at least there should be some sort of consultation before passing the laws, that what the concerned communities think about them. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Muhammad Abu Bakr wants to ask a question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my question is that it is very difficult to sustain such a protest for a long time. Sir, who is backing and funding the farmers' protest? Your comment on it.
Well, the government argues, and the media also maintains, that these farmers that are protesting on the borders of Delhi are from well-to-do backgrounds. Like, these are not, for instance, the poor farmers of some faraway states. These are the rich farmers of Punjab and Haryana who have been, over the years, selling their produce to the government, 80 to 90% of their produce at the minimum support price in APMC. So they've made the government argues that they've made good money out of it. And that's why they can come and they can protest. And that's why they argue that if they were not as well to do, they would have been going tending their farms instead of protesting at the protest site in Delhi. So the apparent financing that we could argue apparently comes from the farmers themselves who are protesting, but maybe they are getting support from diasporas abroad or their supporters, but I don't know of any of that.
Thank you, sir.
Another, I think Mariam Mastoor, a research analyst from the Institute of Regional Studies, wants to ask a question. Over to you, Mariam Mastoor.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Aarish, for a wonderful presentation. My question is also related to the support of celebrities to the farmers' movement. As we know that there has been a very strong backlash against the celebrities who supported the farmers' movement in India. So how do you think the backlash has been perceived in international media? Was there some condemnation or they were completely quiet about it? Thank you.
Well, you are quite right. The backlash against these celebrities exhibited itself in a variety of ways. So like I was following the Twitter handle of Rihanna, and when she tweeted, she had 108 million followers, and after the tweet, her followers came down to 101 million. I think she's now standing at 102 million. So I think many of our Indian followers who were not sympathetic to her views, they kind of unfollowed her on Twitter. So the backlash against these celebrities, not just in terms of unfollowing, but also in terms of all the responses to their tweets, some very, very ugly, did not fly well with the people who kind of support democratic expression of opinion. But overall, I think if you're talking about its impact on the political standing of India internationally, I think very marginal.
Thank you. Aarish, I was just reading yesterday that state assemblies are also coming up with the counter legislation. So what is the BJP's stand on it?
I think it's only the Punjab. I think what I've heard is that the Punjab Assembly is trying to do that. But as I said, like I'll have to dig deeper into the legal constitutional provisions with regard to it. But I think on any concurrent subject, if there is a federal legislation and it's in conflict with any state legislation, and I think there is some provision in these laws as well that in case of any conflict with any state legislation, these laws will prevail. But to be honest, I think I need to study this a bit more.
Thank you. I was just also concerned that this is in Pakistan, the situation is also going something very disturbing in terms of dismantling the market committees. I was just talking with my colleague, and he said that market committee, government of Pakistan is also going to dismantle this kind of a structure. So don't you think, and there is also some signs that farmers are going to protest in Pakistan as well. So what's your take on it?
I'm not aware if Pakistan's farm laws are as protective of the farmers as they were in India before the introduction of these three laws. I think the Indian farmers are way better protected, were way better protected by the state than Pakistani farmers. And I can only wish Pakistan's government best of luck if the farmers in Pakistan. Remember, we had once seen farmers protest in D Chowk, and the way the government handled that protest, and it was number one, the numbers were not that high, and the government was able to control the situation effectively in that case. So if the numbers would be high in Islamabad, and if they would come, and if political opposition would support them, that could be a problem.
Thank you. President Aarish, Ambassador Najeeb Riaz wants to ask a question. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Arish, I have basically two questions. The first thing is that it's more or less a standoff now. The government is not willing to relent, the farmers are not willing to blink. Do you think that such a situation can go on for a very long time? Because as far as the international community and some of the celebrities are concerned, they are behind the farmers. But does the farmer movement has the necessary steam to continue for a long time? Because it's been there since November of last year. My second question is that India is a country which is not a food surplus. So if the farmer movement continues unabated for a considerable length of time, would there be issues of food security also? Thank you.
Sir, on your first point about how is this farmers' protest going to pan out in future if the farmers are sticking to the rigid maximalist position and and the government is unwilling to agree to it. I think the farmers will need to bring some flexibility to their stand if they want to achieve something out of it. If they continue like this, I think, sir, if you remember when there was this dharna of the PTI in Islamabad, that dharna ended when there was a gruesome terrorist attack in Peshawar, in which a lot of children were killed. So for some time, I was also afraid that there might be some kind of a false flag operation by India, just to get these farmers off the street. But now I think the Indian government has, I think, past that phase when it should worry too much about it. So I think unless the farmers show some flexibility in their stance, I think they would just have to make an excuse to just vacate the place. You would just have to come up with something that, this happened or that happened, or, we have to go back to the farms, or, national interest is supreme to us, or something of the sort that saves their face and they can go back. Because the way I see it right now, the government has steadied itself after the initial shock, and it's doesn't seem to be that much worried about the farmers' protest. And as I said, the government has neutralized the farmers' aggression by discrediting what happened on January 26th. Whether it was instigated by the government as the farmers claim or not, that's a different story. But farmers cannot use aggression again. I think that would be a serious blow to their cause if they do that again. And if they keep sitting, the government is not going to listen. So they'll have to come up with an excuse to just vacate the place. Sir, on your point about its impact on food security of India, I don't think it would have any impact on food security, no matter how long the farmers stay there, because these farmers, as I said, are from well-to-do backgrounds. They have people there working in their farms, and India is a populous country. Even if thousands of people are protesting at one side, it doesn't mean that most of the farmers are doing nothing. So I don't think it's going to have any impact whatsoever on food security of India.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think personally, I feel that these laws are pretty good in the sense that it is going to regularize all the structure. So I think there must be some awareness with training and education to the farmers, because most of the farmers, I'd say almost all the farmers do not have sufficient knowledge about the laws, about the current laws. So they can get the maximum benefit out of it if they have been given very concrete sort of training to the farmers, so they can better benefit from this. So I think this is for me. It's a pretty good laws. But what do you say? Are you agree? Do you agree or
Well,
what's your take?
I would kind of club this with the remark that Tabinda made about the government should have consulted with the farmers before introduction of these laws, and the government could have perhaps raised awareness about these laws, and the government, like, we cannot blame the government for showing rigidity in not negotiating. So the government did show flexibility and did say that we are ready to negotiate anything that the farmers are objecting to in these laws. And I've gone through the statements given by the Union Agriculture Minister right after the first meeting, and he categorically stated that they were willing to negotiate anything in these laws, amendments, by introducing amendments, but they were not ready to scrap all the laws altogether. So I think the government cannot be blamed for that, but the government, and that's what some editorials of leading Indian newspapers also urge the government, that the government needs to raise more awareness about these laws. But Imran, I think the laws, good laws or bad laws, I think there needs to be a balance between, especially when it comes to the agriculture sector, there needs to be a balance between free market and food security. So I think if, and perhaps that's a question for another research for an agricultural expert, to see whether these laws will actually harm the food security of India as the farmers claim or not. So I think that is also something that the government needs to be aware of, to balance the two sides of the coin, that is free market in the agriculture sector and food security of the country, especially when your country is as big as India with 1.25 billion people living in it.
Thank you very much. We are approaching to the end of this talk, and the bottom line is that the farmer protest, as you said, that is not going to create troubles for BJP governments. Its trajectory, if you see, it's going down. So with that, I thank you all the participants. And I thank you, Aarish, for giving a very comprehensive presentation on this pressing issue. We would continue our discussion on this topic sometime again. So thank you, participant. Thank you, President, my research team, especially Ahmad Farooq for technical support. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz, everybody.